Now you think that with cycling being a non-impact sport, that aches and pains wouldn't really feature that often, but speak to any cyclist and pretty much all will have experienced some level of back soreness or pain at some point. It's actually something that I occasionally suffer from too, but I know why I get it and how to fix it. And that's what I want to do for you too. So today I'm going to be running through a number of tips to help you identify why you may be getting a sore back on a road bike or a TT bike and how to reduce that. Now backs are obviously very complicated things. I don't think I need to tell you that. We've got all sorts going on in them. We've got muscles, tendons, nerves, bones, all working together to control your movement and maintain your posture. And how you use them to achieve your position on the bike can make a huge difference. Now, generally speaking, we adopt one of either two types of flexion or movement or bending around the back region when we're on the bike. We have flexion of the hip, which is like so, or flexion of the lumbar spine, which is like so. And it's this latter, the flexion of the lumbar spine, to achieve your position that is most associated with back pain and soreness when cycling, and particularly so when we're in the aero bars for long periods of time, as you may get in a long distance triathlon. But the reason that many bend or flex from the lumbar spine as opposed to from the hips is simply that they can't get into this flexed hip position, or they find that they can't put out the same power when they're in the flexed hip position as to when they are in the flexed lumbar spine position. And that generally comes down to a lack of mobility or flexibility or range in the hamstring, the glutes, the posterior hip, or the lower back. And if this is you, well, you're likely nodding as I'm saying this, but if you're unsure, there's a quick and simple test you can do to check your hip flexion range. Just lie on your back with your spine relaxed, then raise one leg as far as possible, flexing from your hip, ensuring that your knee remains straight. Stop your leg when you feel resistance and your lower back starts to flex. To comfortably achieve flexion of the hip when cycling, you should be striving to get your leg to around 80 to 90 degrees. And then if you're someone that spends a lot of time sat down for work, well, try to get up a little bit more and do some stretching perhaps when you're up and about. Equally, don't get back from a ride and plonk yourself down in the couch or the sofa, because your muscles are going to start cooling down in that shortened and tightened position, particularly so around the hip region and the hamstrings. If you'd like some ideas on some stretches to do, well, we actually have a video on that, so I'll send you to that at the end of this one. But now moving on to the reason why I occasionally get a sore back when cycling. I'm sure some of you are the same out there, and it's largely down to my core or lack of core. That's not necessarily right. It's actually more down to just it's not activating or working as it should when it should. Now personally, this tends to happen for myself when I've had a bit of time off the bike and I guess my core has forgotten how to activate and how to work while cycling. And what it feels like is that my lower back is taking all the load in maintaining my posture while cycling rather than dispersing it across my whole core. Now obviously you can address this by doing some strengthening of the core in your lower back and lumbar spine region, and we have loads of exercises and videos for that. I'll throw you to one at the end of this, and to be honest, I see no harm in doing that. But as I mentioned earlier, you could have a perfectly strong core. It's just not activating and working at the right time. So I've actually got a nifty trick here. Bear with me. I learned it off a pro cyclist years ago whilst out riding. Now he suggested to me having your arms fairly straight, not dead straight, you can have a slight flex in them so they're loosely straight, palms against the handlebars, and pull inwards towards yourself and really squeeze that core. And you should feel that and just hold that as long as you like whilst you're actually cycling and moving the legs. Or take it a step further, take your arms away and control the movement of your head or your nose down towards the handlebar, and again, really squeeze that core to help that movement. Both really good. Obviously, don't do these outdoors. I would recommend doing indoor on a fixed trainer. And then of course we have the bike fit or setup, and this could actually be the starting point for some people out there. Now ideally we would recommend getting a professional bike fit or setup, but there are a couple of common issues that are relatively simple to fix. So one of which is your saddle height. Too high saddle height can result in you actually just rocking from side to side in your hips as you pedal, and that can then result in you actually having some lower back pain. So if you're wondering whether this is you or not, then best thing to do is actually set your bike up on an indoor trainer in front of a mirror and just monitor it yourself, or in the reflection of the window, perhaps if you don't have a mirror there. Or you can go out on the road, ride with a friend and get them to monitor it and relay that to you, or better, get them to record it so you can see it after. Now what you're looking for is a slight bend in your knee at the bottom of your pedal stroke at around that 6 o'clock position. If your leg is completely straight, then you want to drop the saddle height just a fraction so that you get around a 25 to 35 degree bend in the knee. You also want to avoid having to reach too much for the handlebars, because if you're too stretched out, it can actually put a lot of strain through your lumbar spine. And then to add to that, don't go slamming your stem like you see some of the pros doing. Having an excessive drop from the saddle to the bars can actually also be quite stressful on the back. And that's not to say that you can't do it all together, but just build up to it, or should I say build down to it with time as you go incrementally. And then just to confuse matters more, equally, you don't want to be in too of an upright and cramped position, because that can also be quite bad on the back. But then it could also come down to the fact that you're consistently riding with too low of a cadence. See, mashing big gears can actually kind of overwork the muscles, particularly those around the hips and the lower back, and as they fatigue, stiffness and pain can start to settle in. So try to avoid riding at 80 RPM or lower. Instead, we want to look for something in the region of 90 to 100 RPM, and that's going to feel like it kind of taxes the cardiovascular system more, whilst hopefully allowing you still to maintain the same power output. It should do, but at the same time, it's going to tax or put less strain through the muscles. Now, it may feel quite odd and strange to start out with if you are someone that resorts to overgearing quite frequently. So what I'd suggest is actually just doing in short stints of high cadence work within your ride, and then resorting back to your normal. So you just hopefully build it up gradually over time. And also just remember to change gear as you hit inclines and any hills. And of course, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or a seasoned cyclist, do not increase your mileage suddenly. Now, like with anything else, if your body isn't conditioned already, your body will compensate for any areas of weakness, and quite often that falls upon your lower back. Your lower back will take all the load, it will compensate on behalf of all those other muscles, and you could run into a few issues. So here at GTN, we're big advocates of the 10% rule, in which you never increase your mileage by anything more than 10% day in, day out, week in, week out. And finally, if you are experiencing pain on just one side of the back, it could be due to an imbalance. Perhaps you have one leg longer than the other. If that is the case, or perhaps you're experiencing extreme pain or prolonged pain, then we would really advise you actually seek some professional advice so that they can really highlight and identify the cause and help you through that specifically for you. Well, I hope that has been useful for you today and you've enjoyed it. If so, give this video a like, give it a thumbs up, and make sure that you are following GTN on social media. And if you're not doing so already, give this channel a subscribe.